It will just tear, which is a pretty scary thought right now. It will happen faster than the structure of space-time. The night sky is changing quickly. In a few years, or even a few decades, it might look completely different. Cosmologists as a whole are raising the alarm. Recently, experts like deGrasse Tyson stated that Polaris will explode, and the story behind it is very strange. Polaris, also called the North Star, has been a steady in the night sky for a long time. It is an important point of reference for astronomers, navigators, and people who study the universe. This could soon change, though, which would affect our night sky and even how far away things are in space. Let's look into what this threat means and what it means for all of us. Come with us as we find out more about Polaris's story as it nears its end. Polaris has been a leading light in the sky for sailors and stargazers for hundreds of years. Its steady presence has been very important for guidance. This security may soon be broken, though. In September 2023, a well-known study paper from the Royal Astronomical Society made people wonder what would happen to this celestial light source. Polaris is almost at the point where it will explode, which could mean that it will never be seen again in the night sky. Let's learn more about Polaris before we talk about what this discovery means. Polaris is a unique star because it is so close to the celestial North Pole. It is also called the North Star or the P-star. It looks like it will stay in the northern sky because it is almost straight above Earth's North Pole. Polaris is a fairly bright yellow-white supergiant star in the constellation Ursa Minor, also known as the Little Dipper. It is much bigger and brighter than our Sun. It's not a single star. It's part of a complicated triple star system. Polaris A and B form a binary pair, and Polaris B goes around them. Gravitational forces form these stars' orbits and affect how they behave because of how they interact with each other. Any changes to these interactions can cause the star's brightness or pulsing patterns to change in ways that are hard to predict. But it's still not clear how these exchanges work in detail. We see light from Polaris that started its trip more than 300 years ago. It is about 323 light-years away from Earth. So, if Polaris exploded right now, we wouldn't notice it until more than 300 years from now. It's possible that Polaris has already gone off, but we haven't seen the light from that event yet because it has made it this far. The North Star has had a huge cultural, navigational, and spiritual meaning since ancient times. Ancient pilots used it as a valuable guide because it was stable and stayed in one place. It helped them find their way across seas and land. Polaris stood for stability and direction because it didn't move in the night sky, which was always moving. Astronomers use Polaris as a key point of reference to study how the stars and planets move and change over time. As a Cepheid variable star, its regular changes in brightness have taught us a lot about the features of stars and how variable stars work. This trait was also very important for figuring out astronomical distances and making sure tools were lined up correctly. These pulsations happen in a rhythm that we know is normal for the star. This makes it easy to guess how it will act. Recent events, though, have shown that Polaris is not acting normally. Astronomers are confused by this change in its pulsation cycle, which has led to a closer look at this strange event in space. Polaris has stopped following its usual pattern and is now going through times of dimming and brightening that are hard to predict. Scientists are now worried that the star may be getting close to the end of its life. This fits with what stars that are getting close to the end of their lives cycle usually do. Polaris pulsation period, which used to be steady, is slowly getting longer. This is because of interactions within its stellar system. We've seen the pulsation period lengthen by 4 to 5 seconds every year, which may not seem like a big deal but has very important effects. Some space experts think that the changes in its surroundings could be caused by the gravitational pull of the Polaris stars, which would have a direct effect on its pulsation patterns. Some people, on the other hand, are more worried and think the star is almost about to explode. It is amazing how much Polaris behaves like Betelgeuse, which is another bright star in the constellation Orion. Strange changes in the brightness of both stars have caused people to worry about the possibility of blasts. These kinds of problems often happen in red giant stars in their twilight phase, before they hit the peak of their life cycles. While NASA has said that Betelgeuse is a major worry, Polaris has not yet been given the same level of attention. As a red supergiant star gets closer to the end of its life cycle, it goes through different stages, such as the main sequence, the red giant stage, and finally the supernova explosion. Researchers think that Polaris has entered the helium-burning phases that stars near the end of their lives go through because its pulsations are so unexpected. These strange things that Polaris is doing are typical of supergiant stars that are getting close to the end of their lives. But there are still no clear signs that it will soon explode as a supernova. Astronomers are slowly looking into these strange events to figure out what will happen to Polaris. If Polaris went supernova, it would probably be a beautiful event in the sky. It might be brighter than the moon and be one of the brightest things we could see for weeks or even months. The way it looks could drastically change the night sky, changing for a moment how we see known constellations like Ursa Minor and the Big Dipper. Polaris is part of this group. Do not worry, Earth would probably be safe even if Polaris exploded, because of how heavy it is and how far away it is. Even though a Polaris explosion might not be as beautiful to look at as Betelgeuse's, it could still be seen for a long time by obscuring nearby stars. Astronomers and telescopes would definitely pay attention, which would get people in the academic world and around the world interested in stargazing. However, it would be harder to see and have less of an effect on Earth's surroundings or atmosphere than a supernova event that happened closer. What about Polaris, though? What will happen to it after a possible supernova? In order to be clear, it is not likely that Polaris will die in a supernova explosion, which is how most big stars end their lives. A supernova is the last and most destructive stage of a giant star's life. It is caused by a huge explosion inside the star. In this cycle, the core falls apart completely, setting off a huge shockwave that blows the star apart fiercely. Polaris isn't big enough, though, to handle such an explosion. Instead, Polaris will lose its top layers and turn into a white dwarf when its nuclear fuel runs out. Because of this change, there won't be a supernova explosion. Instead, it will end quietly as a small, very thick space rock. A white dwarf is what's left of a low or medium mass star that has used up all of its nuclear fuel. It is very dense, about as heavy as the Sun, but squeezed down to the size of Earth. When this happens, we won't be able to look at its remains from Earth the same way we look at the star now. By comparing the effects that Polaris explosion is predicted to have with those of other supernovae, we can learn a lot about how stars change over time and what happens to them in the end. Finding differences between what we thought would happen and what actually happened, like SN 1987A and later events like SN 2011 Fe or SN 2014 J, helps us understand what might happen after Polaris dies. For example, SN 1354 caused the Crab Nebula to form. This nebula is still growing and giving off radiation at different wavelengths, giving scientists a lot to study. Similarly, SN 1987A, which was seen in the Large Magellanic Cloud, helped scientists learn more about how nucleosynthesis works and what supernova remains are made of. For example, the growth of nebulae, the release of cosmic rays, and changes in light can all help us understand what makes Polaris special. Material is thrown out during a supernova explosion, which reacts with the interstellar gas and dust around it, adding heavy elements and playing a part in how stars are born and die. This is how clouds like the Crab Nebula form. The supernova shockwave also speeds up the release of high-energy particles, which has effects on astrophysics and the conditions of cosmic radiation. Researchers look at the mass, makeup, and speed of the materials ejected between Polaris' predicted burst and other events that have been seen to make an accurate comparison. This is done by looking at the light curves, spectra, and leftovers from these events and guessing that Polaris' predicted burst will have similar features. Checking to see if Polaris explosion could cause nebulae or certain chemical distributions helps us understand what is most likely to happen. Comparing the pulsational unpredictability of stars like Polaris that are getting close to the end of their lives to that of known supernova precursors is another important area of research. This close look can help confirm any patterns or differences, giving us more information about how the explosion happened. Pulsational changes in stars that are getting close to the end of their lives may be signs of internal instability or approaching disasters. This can help us understand how stars evolve before they explode as supernovae. Astronomers are still confused by the strange things they've seen happen with Polaris, even after careful readings and a lot of research. Figuring out the complicated factors that cause these discrepancies is essential for improving our knowledge of how stars evolve. To figure out what causes Polaris's unpredictable pulses, scientists from different fields need to work together and create new theory models and observational methods. Astronomers are very worried about what might happen if Polaris goes away as an important point of reference in the night sky. Telescopes on the ground and readings of the sky would need to be recalibrated, which would make galactic estimates less accurate. The fact that the event of Polaris could affect navigation systems and cultural practices that use celestial markers shows how important it is. Due to Polaris's complicated behavior, more study needs to be done and more investigations need to be done. Astronomers need to figure out how to explain the mysterious pulsations and come up with real solutions, realizing how important it is. By learning more, we might be able to figure out the mysteries of the universe in the end. Finally, the answer to Polaris's fate is still unknown, and time will only show what it really means. No matter what, the fact that people are still trying to learn and understand, even though they know nothing is certain, shows how interested they are in solving the mysteries of the world. As we think about what will happen to Polaris, it's important to remember that it's more than just a star. It's a view into bigger things happening in the universe. We have learned a lot more about the night sky thanks to the North Star. Ancient cultures used its location to make calendars and yearly farming methods, which connected events in the sky to things that happen in nature. As societies grew, Polaris' stable position helped people find their way, which made exploration and trade easier. This makes it an important part of sea history. In modern astronomy, Polaris is an important point for lining up telescopes and other tools used for viewing. Astronomers have been able to get better at measuring how far away things are in the universe thanks to how bright it is. The star's steady light output helps build the cosmic distance ladder, which is an important tool for figuring out how far away galaxies are and how the universe is growing. It's interesting that studying Polaris also opens up new ways to study how stars change over time. Researchers learn more about the life cycles of other stars like it by studying this one's. Scientists can compare Cepheid variables to other stars by looking at their pulsation times and changes in brightness. This helps us learn more about how stars change as they go through different stages of their lives. As we look into the last stages of a star like Polaris, we need to think about what it would mean if it turned into a white dwarf. Many stars in the world go through this process, which leaves behind pieces of the star that will last for billions of years. The study of white dwarfs has big effects on how we think about the history of stars and the universe. The connection between dying stars and their surroundings is also an interesting subject to research. When stars remove their outer layers, they add heavier elements that were made during their lifetimes through nucleosynthesis to the medium between the stars. This recycling process is very important for making new stars, planets, and eventually living things. Scientists can find out how matter moves through the world by looking at the remains of stars like Polaris. When a star like Polaris might explode, it makes us wonder what would happen to the rest of the universe. Even though its distance from Earth makes it seem safer, the powerful events that happen during supernovae, like shock waves and the release of high-energy particles, can change the way nearby stars are formed. This could cause bursts of very fast star formation or the breakup of gas clouds, which would create new star systems. While the story of Polaris has scientific implications, it also makes us think about our place in the world from a philosophical point of view. As our knowledge of the life cycles of galaxies grows, we are reminded of how temporary celestial things are. People have been able to follow Polaris for hundreds of years. When it finally changes, the night sky will look different, and it will be a powerful reminder of how the world is always changing. Astronomy has often made people wonder what will happen to our world and species. As Polaris gets closer to its possible end, it makes us think about our own lives and the things we leave behind. Finding out more about stars like Polaris sparks a sense of wonder and curiosity that lasts for generations. Finally, better observations and technological advances will let scientists keep a closer eye on Polaris than ever before. New telescopes and space projects are going to be able to record a lot of information about how the stars behave. These findings will not only help us understand how Polaris lived and died, but they will also help us learn more about the world as a whole. In conclusion, Polaris has a story that goes far beyond what we can see in the night sky. It's the result of hundreds of years of human study, an important standard for measuring the universe, and a place to think about the bigger questions of life. We are a part of a bigger story about the universe as we watch what happens to this beloved star. This story changes how we think about life, time, and the universe itself.